कुमार स्वामी नायक गोंगो लुगु लटोका रेडियो फीजी 2 में पुराना गाना लगे हमें बहुत अच्छा लगे।
रेडियो फीजी 2 देश की धड़कन।
In the news tonight, 2 lives lost to TC Yasa. Widespread damage in Vanuatu. And different curfew times effective tonight.
From the studios of FBC Suva, Edwin Nana.
Bulawanaka, Fiji. 2 people have died as a result of tropical cyclone Yasa. This was confirmed by Director National Disaster Management Vasiti Soko earlier today. One of the deceased is a 3-month-old from the Western Division and the other a farmer from the Northern Division. Kelly Vadala reports.
A 46-year-old farmer of Love outside Lambasa died after a portion of his house collapsed at the height of TC Yasa last night.
I just hold this one and the small one and want to lift the board up, but we can't. And we call just husband, wake up, he did not wake up.
Ramesh Chand was crushed underneath a wall while his elder son suffered injuries. Speaking to FBC News, Chand's wife recalled how the family of 4 were taking shelter in one room when the house gave way under strong winds. As her husband and son lay trapped under the debris, she grabbed her younger son and ran to a family home nearby to seek help. Ruplata says she and her young son were exposed to the full brunt of TC Yasa, having to struggle for about 15 minutes, cowering from strong winds, repeatedly falling over and lying in bushes.
We come there and we sit down, then we come and the wind goes, then we sit down, we lie down, we sleep. About 10 or 15 minutes take us to come here. There was no creek, we just jump. And then when we come here, these people go and save the son and husband.
For Vishal Chand, it's a tragedy he is struggling to come to terms with.
The hurricane came, then we sit on the bed. My father told that go and sit on under the bed. Then the big hurricane come, then all the house go that side.
Family members had to return once the cyclone had passed to retrieve Chand's body. Kelly Vadala, FBC News.
Tropical cyclone Yasa caused widespread damage in parts of Vanuatu. FBC News today took a helicopter and flew over Number Walu, Mbua, Lekutu, Nasarawanga, Deketi, Senganga, Tambia, Lambasa Town and Savu-Savu. These exclusive pictures show significant damage to infrastructure, especially in Number Walu, Mbua, Lekutu, Nasarawanga, Deketi and Senganga. Houses destroyed, roofs blown away, a few schools damaged, fallen power lines on the road, a number of crossings washed away, and trees were also uprooted due to the Category 5 system. Fijians living in these areas could be seen trying to repair their homes, clearing debris, drying out household items and clothes. Lambasa and Savu-Savu had minimal damage compared to these pictures from the aerial view. Parts of Koro Island also suffered less damage when compared to TC Winston. Ovalau was also spared. And Tropical Cyclone Yasa has caused havoc in the Northern Division, destroying homes and dreams. Lambasa resident Karuna Devi had only just finished rebuilding her home to have it damaged by strong winds. Kritika Kumar with the story.
This mother of 2 is counting her lucky stars that she and her family were in an evacuation center when TC Yasa blew their house down.
We were yesterday we came to school and we stay last night in school. We can't come outside just because the hurricane. So
Devi had previously lost her house in a fire which claimed the lives of her 3 daughters. Having struggled to rebuild, she is now at a loss on how to piece her life back together.
I collect the things and then make the house, but the hurricane came and fly everything.
First light this morning revealed the trail of destruction left by TC Yasa in parts of the north. Lambasa Chamber of Commerce President Satish Kumar says the damage will likely be widespread.
And the trees, the big damages on this, I can see all over in Namu area, all this, it's a big damages. You can see some of the houses, the roof has blown away. Few houses I can see.
Through the night, Kumar says Lambasa town was in darkness, being battered by strong winds. Kritika Kumar, FBC News.
And homes have also been destroyed in parts of Savu Savu as a result of tropical cyclone Yasa. As the system passed over Vanuatu, it left homes and property in tatters, Venina Rakotonga reports.
15 homes in Belengor settlement in Savu Savu have been destroyed, but residents are glad they have no fatalities.
The house is probably damaged and they have nothing to go forward, but at the moment only I'm giving my house to them to go and evacuate there, and I'm supplying the food to them.
Ram says at the height of Yasa, most residents took shelter in his house. Residents this morning began cleaning up debris left behind by Yasa, as well as cleaning homes that were flooded.
But the wind was very fast and strong, but we managed to survive. We have no water at the moment and no power.
Residents of Naviria and Savu Savu say they feared for their lives when the winds and rain were at their peak overnight, and they too are thankful to be safe.
We were awake, and we were very scary. We were very scared actually. We were very scared. Like around 20 to 50% of the structure of the house being blown away.
Belengor and Naviria have no electricity and water supply. Venina Rakotonga, FBC News.
Up ahead, Lao battered by TC Yasa. And help is coming, says Prime Minister.
मैं तो दिल्ली में रहता हूँ और रेडियो फीजी रोज सुनता हूँ.
रेडियो फीजी 2 देश की धड़कन.
Welcome back. Prime Minister Voreng Bainimarama is reminding Fijians that we are not out of the woods yet in relation to tropical cyclone Yasa. Bainimarama says 93,000 Fijians were on the direct path of the cyclone. Aquila Dama reports.
TC Yasa may have left, but the rehabilitation works will surely be costly.
The dust is yet to settle, and we will continue to assess the scale of damages in the coming days. But we are likely looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in damages.
The Prime Minister is clear on government's plan for the next 24 hours.
Our operational focus for the next 24 hours is on maintaining public safety, clearing roads, restoring critical infrastructure and services, re-establishing communications with severely affected areas, and coordinating support from our development partners.
Bainimarama is thankful and acknowledged our frontline workers who have been there from the start.
Our police officers, technicians, GFL line workers, disaster officials, RFMF and Fijian Navy personnel, and other frontline staff have worked tirelessly through the night and this morning to aid affected communities. All they ask for in return is your patience and cooperation. Please adhere to their advice. Stay sheltered and stay out of floodwaters and stay alert.
The government machinery is expected to be in full force from Monday, with civil servants back at work.
We are mobilizing every resource available to respond in areas severely affected by this most recent super cyclone. All civil servants will be returning to work on Monday.
Bainimarama is assuring affected Fijians that help is on the way. Aquila Dama, FBC News.
Different curfew hours have been imposed for Vanuatu and the rest of Fiji effective tonight. The National Disaster Management Office came up with the new times after consultation with relevant stakeholders. The Fiji Police Force has been tasked to ensure Fijians abide by the curfew and will man checkpoints around the country. Koroi Tandulala reports.
The curfew hours for Vanuatu began from 5 p.m. today and will be lifted at 6 a.m. tomorrow, while curfew for the rest of the country will begin in the next hour until 5 a.m. tomorrow.
From tomorrow, all curfews will revert to COVID-19 hours from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Acting Commissioner of Police Rusiate Tundravu says their officers will also be stationed at evacuation centers to ensure the safety of evacuees.
The safety and security of evacuees that are out there at the evacuation center, apart from the routine operations that we do and the general monitoring of the situation.
Operational focus for the next 24 hours is on maintaining public safety, clearing roads, restoration of critical infrastructure and services.
The National Disaster Management Office is now awaiting the green light from the Maritime Safety Authority of Fiji for the deployment of their teams to assist those affected in maritime islands. Koritandulala, FBC News.
Meanwhile, the Fiji Police Force will continue to enforce measures in place to ensure the safety of Fijians post-TC Yasa. Acting Commissioner of Police Rusiate Tundravu says they'll also be prioritizing the safety of officers as they continue to ensure the safety of the public. Tundravu says they have plans to help them continue their operations post-TC Yasa.
We'll just look at some of the police stations that have been affected. We need to change our police officers there. If there's a need for them to rest, we'll rest them for 1 or 2 hours for 2 weeks, and then we'll get in fresh legs on the ground.
And we now join Korey Tandulala live. Korey, what can you tell us about inter-island and maritime travel?
Edwin, the Maritime Safety Authority of Fiji has made it abundantly clear that for shipping companies or who wishes to take passengers for inter-island or maritime travel.
And it seems we may have lost Korey due to technical difficulties. We will move on. Hundreds of Fijians in Nassau and Korotolu on Mode Island in the Lao group say they were not ready for the ferocity of TC Yasa. Mode secondary school teacher Taufa Vunise says although they had been listening to the warnings, they did not expect the wrath of Mother Nature to be so severe. Strong winds, heavy rain and damaging swells battered the Lao group for hours. Josiah Nanunga has more.
Villagers on Mode Island were prepared and stayed indoors. But when TC Yasa arrived, it shocked them with savage winds, storm surges, and torrential rain.
The school is suffering right now because the villagers will be safe because we are facing Como Island and the villagers is right inside. And I hope they are safe because when we went to the village to inspect, we informed them that the cyclone has not yet finished until 6 a.m. tomorrow.
The weather did let up for a few minutes, but those on the island were reluctant to step out. Vunise says they did not think TC Yasa would be as severe as TC Winston.
Those teachers who are experiencing Winston in 2016 back in the school they were in, they say this is just like Winston. They were think it has gone, but it come back. This is just like what is happening now.
The situation has come down in Moala and neighboring islands with initial reports of minimal damage.
Everything has come down. At the moment, villagers are cleaning up the debris in the village and the drainage blocks. Not much was destroyed and all villagers are safe.
Wanisi stressed that following any natural disasters, the villagers react quickly to rebuild and rehabilitate, which has strengthened their resilience. Josiah Nanunga, FBC News.
And we've got Korey Tandulala back on the line with us. Korey, I understand there are still some restrictions on inter-island travel.
Edwin, the Maritime Safety Authority of Fiji has made it abundantly clear that only ship or vessels that will be carrying emergency relief items to maritime islands who are affected by TC Yasa will be allowed to travel without needing any clearance. However, for other shipping companies that wishes to take customers or passengers who wishes to spend Christmas in outer islands, they will need to obtain the clearance from the Maritime Safety Authority before they are allowed for any maritime island travel.
Been closed for the last 2 days, Korey. Is there any update on when retail operations will return to normal?
Edwin, the businesses in Suva were closed for the past 2 days, and this is the likeliest scenario for most of the towns and cities across the country as TC Yasa passes over the Fiji group. From the directive issued by the National Disaster Management Office, they will be able to resume normal operation from tomorrow onwards.
And as for Cabinet, what situation updates have they been receiving from DISMAC?
Edwin, the assessment on the impact of Tropical Cyclone Yasa over most parts of Fiji is yet to be carried out. The Prime Minister and members of Cabinet will be briefed accordingly by the National Disaster Management Office as and when they get information from the ground as what sort of impact we're looking at. And this information, as it becomes available to us, the members of the public will be informed accordingly. One of the things that we also need to keep in mind is for Maritime Islands and also for parts of the country that was affected by TC Yasa, there's sort of like intermittent disruption to network services, and this will also, the network companies are also working towards resorting this, and this is expected to be solved in the next 72 to 84 hours as well, Edwin.
After the break, TC Yasa to leave the Fiji group by midnight, and health teams out on the ground.
Pula nadang go approach lang kerse, go erkraki, do televisi na barong na Radio Fiji 1, na domibit.
Radio Fiji 1.
Welcome back. About 18,846 people are tonight sheltering in 389 active evacuation centers around the country. Once word broke of Tropical Cyclone Yasa approaching Fiji in vulnerable communities were on standby to evacuate yesterday. Karalaini Tavi visited some centers around the Central Division today and files this report.
About 60 people from Lami village are taking refuge at their community hall, awaiting clearance from authorities to return home.
I knew that I had to have a backup plan in the case that things got worse. So I put together a team that will help the villagers in time of need. For me, my main concern was the safety of our women and children. Though they were not affected as much, I had to ensure that each and every villager was safe.
These villagers were lucky to be spared the worst of TC Yasa. Dema Lewambai and her family have taken shelter at Vishnudaya Memorial Primary School in Raiwanga.
We wanted to return home today since the wind and rain has stopped, but for our own safety, the police told us to stay here for a while before we are advised otherwise.
Unaisi Modile Sindra didn't think twice and rushed to the nearest evacuation center when the wind started to pick up late last night.
Last night we could feel the strong winds and heavy rain. When the coconut palm trees and branches started falling on top of our house, I took my 2 children and we came straight to the evacuation center here.
The Western Division has 126 active centers with 7,775 evacuees. Northern Division has 78 centers with 3,675 evacuees. The Eastern Division has 37 centers with 1,621 evacuees. And in the Central Division, they have 146 active centers with 5,775 evacuees. Karlini Tavi, FBC News.
Tropical Cyclone Yasa was downgraded to a Category 3 system earlier today and was located about 65 kilometers off Lakemba in the Lau Group at 3 p.m. The Fiji Meteorological Service says at midnight the center of TC Yasa is expected to pass Kambara. It's expected to be located about 170 kilometers east-northeast of Onoilau by 6 a.m. tomorrow. Senior forecaster Stephen Meke says TC Yasa will exit Fiji waters around 3 p.m. tomorrow as a Category 2 system.
For those islands of Onyata, Moe, Como, Namukailau, Fulanga, Nongya, storm warning remains for Kambara, Nayau, Lakemba, Yazata, Didia, Vanuatu, Vanumbalabu, Kanavea, Tuvuda, Batoa, and Onilaue. A gale warning also remains for Vanumbalabu, Lakemba, and those islands over the northern Lau Group. For the rest of Fiji, we still have a strong wind warning that is in force. There's also a storm surge and damaging heavy swell warning still for the coastal areas of southern Lau Group, especially during high tides tonight, which is at around 10 p.m.
And we now join Kelly Vadala live. Kelly, what sort of weather is expected in the coming days as TC Yasa exits Fiji?
Edwin, rain has started clearing over most parts of the country and expected to persist over the Lao group in the next 24 hours. The Fiji Met Service says we can expect a little bit of fine weather from tomorrow. In the Western Division, there was a little bit of sunshine in Suva as well. So as TC Yasa exits our shores, it's safe to say that the weather will improve going into the longer Christmas week. But for now, there's some areas that are still flooded, and there's a lot of debris that's been left behind by TC Yasa. So before I wrap up, I would urge Fijians to please stay safe and continue to exercise caution. Eddie.
Naka Kelly, the Health Ministry has activated teams around Fiji to prevent any disease outbreaks in the wake of Tropical Cyclone Yasa. Communicable diseases are a major concern following natural disasters. However, authorities say they are prepared. Jeshulal reports.
Health teams around Fiji are already on the ground, ensuring that all preventative measures are taken to prevent disease outbreaks.
One for wash cluster, and there's another one that deals with food and nutrition cluster. So they pre-position themselves to be able to distribute amenities that are required for maintaining sanitation and ensuring adequate nutrition.
Following Cyclone Yasa, there are worries that disruption to water and sanitation infrastructure, poor hygiene and overcrowding at evacuation centers could lead to diseases. Dr. Fong says they have prepared for this possibility.
There's also a number of plans that relate to preemptive measures to reduce the adverse impact of leptospirosis, dengue, diarrhea and typhoid. And that's already a process that we have activated.
With thousands of evacuees around Fiji, there are a number of health protocols that need to be followed.
One of the protocols that we do when we are about to close the evacuation center is that Ministry of Health usually sprays the evacuation center to ensure its safety. In addition to that, the Fiji Police Force, together with the Divisional Commissioner's Office, they mobilize themselves to the ground to identify homes for evacuees and to ensure that they are safe to return home.
Health teams will continue to monitor affected communities in the coming days and weeks to ensure sanitation and hygiene is maintained. Jeshulal, FBC News.
Still to come, assessments begin on damaged utilities and public transport back on the roads.
हमारे सामने नाइक है गोंगवा लेबू लटो का रेडियो फीजी 2 में।
Welcome back. Utilities including water, electricity and roads have been severely damaged in the Northern Division. Initial indications are that public infrastructure was badly affected and teams are already on the ground as of this morning, assessing damage and trying to restore services. Aquila Dama has the details.
Water is a basic need. However, after a natural disaster like a tropical cyclone, authorities need to ensure necessary steps are taken before supply can resume.
At the moment, the main focus is on Lambasa area. We're sending teams over tomorrow, and I'll probably travel tomorrow myself to inspect our sites and make sure the assets are on the ground and going well. We have water restoration ongoing, so that should be restored in a couple of days.
Omanson is also urging Fijians to make sure water is safe for consumption.
And also, people should be boiling water at the moment until we actually notify them not to boil water.
Energy Fiji Limited is reminding the public that restoration of power after a cyclone is not that simple. Some parts of the country are without electricity, including some which were not seriously affected.
Thereafter, we have to inspect every bit of power line to make sure it's safe before we switch it on. So it's not like, the power goes off and once the cyclone goes past, we turn on the switch and generators. No, we need to inspect everything. Otherwise, so many people could be killed, by stepping on live wires and all that sort of thing.
The damage to roads have not been as severe as expected on the two main islands, according to Fiji Roads Authority. However, that's not the case for the Maritime Islands.
On the Maritime Islands, the coastal roads are in a bad condition. So as soon as we get go ahead to go to the islands, They're going to do an assessment and then we'll come up with a plan how to fix it.
A clear indication of how much damage to our infrastructure suffered may be determined next week. Aquila Dhama, FBC News.
Teachers of Ratu Kandavu Levu School activated their own emergency team to look after 466 evacuees sheltering in 2 evacuation centers at the school. Principal Naisa Toko says 51 staff members, including 40 ancillary staff, were manning the centers to ensure the safety of evacuees. Sainiani Boiler reports villagers were coming in since Wednesday, well ahead of the arrival of TC Yasa.
These teachers have been working 24/7, filling in as cooks, nurses and even providing security to 466 evacuees.
We have organized our shifts, 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts. We started from Wednesday, right from the kitchen to the transport. We even provided transport for the villages, and the whole of last night everybody was on deck working and visiting the camps that we have set up here.
The Kuinoku villager Epelinduwanga says they were at home yesterday when the directive came from the district office for all villagers to evacuate.
We were getting prepared, tightening our houses and assets. When we were told to move to the school, we moved in yesterday and know that we are safe here.
Turani Koro Levi Nandakudha says houses were damaged during tropical cyclone Winston and has commended RKS management for looking after them.
I thank the school. It was not an easy task looking after us. We were brought here to be safe, and there is nothing more we can do but thank them.
Nandakudha says their farms were severely affected by the strong winds last night and are planning to move back as soon as possible. Sainiani Boila, FBC News.
Meanwhile, more than 30 families are currently sheltering in 2 evacuation centers at Queen Victoria School in Tailevu. These are families from nearby villages, including Lawaki, Vidorodoro and Nanrano. Sainiani Boila reports again.
There were continuous heavy rain and strong winds experienced by families near QVS last night, and with lessons learned from tropical cyclone Winston, they evacuated early.
We came early yesterday morning knowing that we will be able to be safe here. We have learned a lot from TC Winston, which fully destroyed our village in 2016.
Naitikutiku says despite the weather having eased, they will await the OK from relevant authorities.
We are still waiting for the call from NDMO to move back. We will only move if we are given the OK. It's for our own safety.
Vidardoro villager Matana Ranawai says their farms were severely affected by the strong winds.
I just came back from the village. Our plantations were severely destroyed. Our houses were okay. Only livestock were affected, together with our farms.
Ranawai says they were fortunate that no lives were lost last night. Sainiani Boila, FBC News.
Public service transport providers were given the green light to resume services today. These include buses, minibuses and taxis. The National Disaster Management Office confirms they too have to abide by curfew hours. Dipesh Kumar reports.
Taxis, minibuses and buses can resume operations, bearing in mind the locations which have been severely affected by Tropical Cyclone Yasa.
And as I'd mentioned, the public transport can also now operate.
Fiji Taxi Association President earlier confirmed that the travelling public was able to access services once the curfew was lifted this morning. Central Eastern Minibuses Association General Secretary says services will continue as NDMO has given the green light.
The Central Eastern Minibus will provide service from tomorrow. We will liaise with the authorities and then we'll start their services.
Fijians have been advised to avoid unnecessary travel in parts of the country which have suffered damage due to TC Yasa. Dipesh Kumar, FBC News.
And just a quick correction in this story, we showed a picture of the former General Secretary of the Fiji Taxi Association, whereas we should have had a picture of Mr. Ruben Singh, the President of the Taxi Association. Apologies for that mistake. But up ahead after the break, Ministry begins damage assessment for schools and municipal markets to reopen.
मैं तो नहीं में रहता हूँ और रेडियो फीजी बहुत रेडियो फीजी रोज सुनता हूँ.
रेडियो फीजी 2 देश की धड़कन.
The Ministry of Agriculture will deploy teams to conduct damage assessment in areas affected by Tropical Cyclone Yasa in possibly the next 72 hours. Permanent Secretary Ritesh Das says they'll be working with the National Disaster Management Office and have a coordinated effort in entering affected areas. Das says they'll be assisting farmers whose farms or crops were destroyed by the cyclone.
Some of these areas are only accessible by boats. So that activity will, once it's commenced, our agricultural staff will be on that as well.
And the Ministry of Education will be conducting an assessment to ascertain damage to schools post TC Yasa. Minister Rosie Akbar says they'll be working with the NDMO. These are videos of damage to one of the schools, Dreketi High in Vanua Levu, where TC Yasa made landfall. So these pictures show some damage to school facilities as well as homes within the locality. Akbar says they will be focusing on areas like these which were severely affected by the cyclone, including Lomai Viti and the Southern Lau group. She adds they will also be looking at other schools around Fiji which weren't necessarily under the direct threat of the cyclone. Meanwhile, the ministry has postponed pending external exams and closed all schools.
We have closed school for this year, and for the exams, it was supervised by the supervisor. So schools are closed now, but we still have 3 pending papers, year 12 and 13. In the next hour, we should be able to advise our students on what's going to happen.
A lack of communication is a major issue in the Northern and Western Division, as Vodafone Fiji's transmission sites have been damaged, misaligned by strong winds, or are without electricity. Chief Executive Ronald Prasad says according to current assessments, 80 sites have been affected by Tropical Cyclone Yasa. Prasad says their teams are working with the Fiji Roads Authority and the Forestry Department to reach transmitter sites.
And from 6 a.m. to around 9 a.m. we have restored 38 of those sites. So there's about 43 in the Western Division that are still impacted because of power issues and misalignment of dishes, and around 37 in the Northern Division that are also impacted.
Meanwhile, Digicel Fiji says it too has connection issues in isolated parts of Lambasa, Mbua and Savu-Savu. Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Local Government, Dimitri Pfeiffer, says the municipal markets in Viti Levu will be able to open tomorrow as per the normal operating hours. Pfeiffer says as per the advice of the National Disaster Management Office, municipal councils removed market structures on the roadsides to ensure the safety and security of all during the Category 5 cyclone. She adds all roadside vendors whose stalls were removed will be accommodated in markets around the country. Pfeiffer added that the informal stalls were safety hazards to traffic and pedestrians in normal periods, and the Permanent Secretary also reiterates that vendors and farmers are to sell their produce from proper facilities. Severe tropical cyclone Yasa Category 3 lies slow moving over the southern Lau group and continues to move southeast. Associated gale force to destructive hurricane force winds, rain and thunderstorms affect some parts of Fiji. Meanwhile, strong winds and brief showers affect the western parts of Viti Levu. And looking at the west, scattered showers were experienced today. Eastwards from Pacific Harbour to Suva, it was rainy with periods of strong winds. And up north, mostly cloudy with occasional showers over Lambasa and Savu-Savu. At sea, rough to very rough seas as TC Yasa exits the group later tonight and into tomorrow. And turning to the tides, the next high tide is at 10:26 p.m. and low tide at 4:44 a.m. Sunrise tomorrow is at 5:27. And looking to tomorrow, the rainy conditions will begin to ease. Looking ahead to Sunday, mainly fine weather. And that was your FBC News for tonight. A curfew is now in effect in Vanua Levu until 6 a.m. tomorrow, and for the rest of Fiji, it comes into effect in about 15 minutes from now. FBC's radio news coverage in Vanua Levu is available on our AM frequency 558 kilohertz. Until tomorrow, keep safe and modemanda.
कुमार स्वामी नायक है गोंगवा लुगु लटोका रेडियो फीजी 2 में पुराना गाना लगे हमें बहुत अच्छा लगे।
रेडियो फीजी 2 देश की धड़कन।